The worst sentence I have ever heard in my life was said during my own birthday dinner. Honestly, we only kept you for the tax benefits. At first, I thought it was some kind of terrible joke, but no one at the table was laughing. My name is Lily Anderson. I'm 25 years old, and until that night, I believed I understood my family. I grew up in a quiet suburban neighborhood where everything looked normal from the outside. My parents were the kind of people who cared a lot about appearances. Our house was always clean, our lawn perfectly trimmed, and we always smiled when neighbors walked by. From the outside, we looked like the perfect family. But inside the house, things were always a little different. My parents were never the affectionate type. They weren't cruel either, at least not in obvious ways. They simply kept a strange emotional distance from me. When other kids talked about their parents hugging them or telling them they were proud, I usually stayed quiet. That kind of thing didn't really happen in my house. Instead, my parents treated everything in life like a calculation. School was important because good grades meant good colleges. Good colleges meant good careers. Good careers meant financial security. And financial security meant success. Everything was practical. Everything was logical. Even when I was a child, I sometimes felt like I was being raised more like a long-term project than a daughter. Still, I tried to believe they loved me in their own way. When I was younger, I worked very hard to make them proud. I studied constantly, avoided trouble, and followed their rules as closely as possible. But even when I did well, their reactions were always muted. If I brought home excellent grades, my father would simply nod. "That's what we expect," he would say. If I won a school award, my mother would say something like, "Good, keep it up." They were never impressed, never excited, just satisfied. For a long time, I thought maybe that was just their personality. Maybe some families simply expressed love differently. As I got older, I began noticing something else that felt strange. My parents talked about money constantly. Taxes, investments, deductions, savings. They could spend hours discussing financial strategies at the dinner table. At the time, I didn't think much about it. Adults talk about money. That's normal. But looking back now, I realized something important. To them, everything had a financial value, even family. By the time I turned 25, I had already built a fairly stable life for myself. I had finished college, found a decent job in marketing, and moved into a small apartment across the city. Our relationship had become calmer once I moved out. Distance seemed to reduce tension. We didn't talk often, but we also didn't argue much anymore. So when my mother called me a week before my birthday, I was surprised. "We're planning a small dinner for your 25th, she said. "You should come." It sounded simple enough. And honestly, I thought it might be nice. Maybe things were improving between us. Maybe this dinner would feel more like a real family celebration. So on the evening of my birthday, I drove to their house, the same house I had grown up in. Walking through the front door felt strangely nostalgic. The furniture was exactly the same pictures hung on the walls. Even the smell of the house hadn't changed. My mother greeted me politely. "Happy birthday," she said. My father gave a small nod from the dining room table. Dinner was already prepared. It wasn't a big party, just the three of us. We sat down and began eating. At first, the conversation was normal. They asked about my job, my apartment, my plans for the future. I answered their questions and tried to keep the mood light. For a moment, it almost felt like a normal family dinner. Then my father suddenly said something strange. "You're 25 now." "Yes," I said. "That means we supported you for quite a long time." I wasn't sure how to respond, so I just nodded. "That's true." He leaned back slightly in his chair. "You know," he continued, "raising a child is very expensive." My mother glanced at him but didn't interrupt. "Yes?" I said slowly. "I imagine it is." Then my father said something that made the entire room go silent. "Well, at least the tax benefits helped." I blinked. "I'm sorry. What?" He looked at me as if he were explaining something obvious. "The tax deductions for dependents," he said calmly. "That was one of the few financial advantages." For a moment, I genuinely didn't understand what he meant. Then he said the sentence that would stay with me forever. "To be honest, that was one of the main reasons we kept you." The fork slipped from my hand and hit the plate. The sound echoed in the quiet room. I stared at him. "You kept me?" I repeated. My mother avoided eye contact. My father shrugged slightly. Well, yes, he said. If we're being honest, I felt like the air had been knocked out of my lungs. Are you saying, I began slowly, that you only raised me because of taxes? My father didn't seem to understand why I looked so shocked. I'm just being practical, he said. And in that moment, sitting at the table where I'd eaten thousands of family meals growing up, I realized something terrifying. The people I thought were my parents might have never truly seen me as their daughter at all. For a few seconds after my father said those words, the entire room felt frozen. I stared at him, waiting for some sign that this was a joke. Maybe he would laugh. Maybe he would say he was just teasing me, but he didn't. Instead, he calmly took another bite of his dinner, as if nothing unusual had just happened. My chest felt tight. Wait, I said slowly, trying to process what I had just heard. I think I misunderstood you. My father looked up from his plate. What part? The part where you said you kept me because of tax benefits. He sighed slightly, like I was making a simple conversation unnecessarily complicated. It's not that dramatic, Lily, he said. But to me, it felt extremely dramatic. Then explain it, I said. My mother shifted uncomfortably in her chair, but she still didn't say anything. My father wiped his mouth with a napkin and leaned back. Look, he began. Raising a child costs a lot of money. Food, clothes, school supplies, healthcare, activities. It all adds up. I sat there silently, listening. But the government provides tax deductions for dependents, he continued. So, financially speaking, having a child does come with certain advantages. I could feel my heartbeat getting faster. But that can't be what you meant, I said quietly. He frowned slightly. What do you mean? You said that was one of the reasons you kept me. My father shrugged. Yes. The word landed like a stone in the middle of the table. I looked over at my mother. Mom, are you hearing this? She finally spoke, but her voice was soft and hesitant. Your father just means that raising a child has practical aspects. Practical. That word made something twist painfully inside my chest. I'm not a financial strategy, I said. No one answered. For a moment, the only sound in the room was the ticking of the kitchen clock. Then my father said something that made everything even worse. You're overreacting. I stared at him in disbelief. How am I overreacting? It was a simple comment, he said. You're turning it into some kind of emotional drama. Emotional drama. I pushed my chair back slightly. Did you ever actually want me? I asked. The question seemed to surprise both of them. My father looked genuinely confused. What kind of question is that? A serious one. He sighed again. You were already here. That's not what I asked. My voice sounded quieter now, but also stronger. I asked if you ever actually wanted me. My mother looked down at the table. My father hesitated, just for a moment, and that tiny pause told me everything. I mean, he said finally, it wasn't exactly planned. Something inside me cracked. So you didn't want a child. It wasn't ideal timing, he replied. I felt like I was listening to a business meeting instead of a conversation about my own existence. And the tax benefits made it worth it? I asked. He shrugged again. It helped. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. 25 years of my life reduced to a financial calculation. Every birthday, every school event, every family dinner, were they all just obligations? I looked around the dining room, the same room where I had done homework at the table, where we had celebrated holidays, where I had blown out birthday candles as a kid. Suddenly it felt like I had imagined all of it, like the memories belonged to someone else. I spent my entire childhood trying to make you proud, I said quietly. Neither of them responded. I thought maybe you were just strict. Maybe you didn't show affection easily. Still silence. But this, I gestured toward the table, toward both of them. This is something else. My father looked annoyed now. You're being dramatic again. I'm trying to understand something, I replied. What? Whether my parents ever actually loved me. My mother finally looked up. Of course we cared about you. Cared, not loved. The difference felt enormous. Did you ever love me? I asked. The room went quiet again, and that silence hurt more than any answer could have. Finally, my father spoke. Love isn't the point. My chest tightened. What is the point then? Responsibility, he said simply. Responsibility. I felt my throat burning. So raising me was just a responsibility you had to manage? Yes, I couldn't sit there anymore. I stood up slowly. My chair scraped softly against the floor. Wow, I said under my breath. My father frowned. Where are you going? I looked at both of them one last time. To get some air, I walked toward the front door, my hands shaking slightly. Behind me, I heard my mother say quietly, "Maybe we shouldn't have said it like that." And my father replied in a calm voice that made everything worse. "She's old enough to hear the truth." The truth. When I stepped outside into the cold night air, I felt like my entire understanding of my life had just been shattered. But the worst part wasn't even what they had said. The worst part was the feeling growing slowly in the back of my mind. Because if my parents truly saw me as nothing more than a financial obligation, then there were probably a lot more truths about my childhood that I hadn't discovered yet. I stood outside my parents' house for several minutes, trying to calm down. The night air was cold, but it helped clear my head a little. My heart was still racing from everything that had just happened inside. I kept replaying the conversation in my mind. To be honest, that was one of the main reasons we kept you. Every time I remembered those words, it felt like something heavy was pressing on my chest. Part of me wanted to believe I had misunderstood them. Maybe they had chosen their words badly. Maybe it sounded worse than they actually meant. But deep down, I knew that wasn't true. My father had always been direct, sometimes brutally direct. He didn't joke about things like that. And the worst part was, my mother hadn't denied it. She hadn't defended me. She had just sat there quietly. Eventually, I walked back inside the house. The dining room was quieter now. My parents were still sitting at the table, but the plates had been pushed aside. When I entered, both of them looked at me. My father spoke first. "Feeling better?" His calm tone made my stomach twist. "I'm not sure," I replied. I slowly returned to my seat, but the atmosphere at the table felt completely different now, like the room itself had changed. "I need to ask you something," I said. My father nodded. "Go ahead. How long have you felt that way?" He frowned slightly. "Felt what way?" "Like raising me was just a financial responsibility." He looked confused again, as if the answer should be obvious. "Well, that's always been the reality." The words landed heavily between us. "So my entire childhood," I said slowly, "you were just calculating expenses and tax deductions?" "That's not what I said, but that's what it sounds like." My mother finally spoke again. "Your father just thinks about things in a practical way." I looked at her. "Mom, did you ever actually want to have a child?" She hesitated. That hesitation hurt more than anything she could have said. "I mean," she started carefully, "we adapted to the situation." Adapted. That word felt cold. "You're talking about my life like it was an unexpected bill," I said. My father crossed his arms. "You're twisting everything we say." "No," I replied quietly. "I'm trying to understand it. For 25 years, I had believed my family was simply strict and emotionally distant. Now it felt like there was something much deeper underneath, something I had never seen before." "Did you ever love me?" I asked again. This time, my father didn't hesitate. "We took care of you," he said. "That's not the same thing." "It should be." I shook my head slowly. "No, it's really not." My mother looked uncomfortable now. "You had food, a home, education," she said softly. "Many children don't have those things." "I'm grateful for that," I replied, but my voice trembled slightly. "That doesn't answer my question." Another silence filled the room. Then my father said something that made my stomach drop. "You're focusing on emotions when you should be focusing on facts." "What facts?" "The fact that raising you cost us hundreds of thousands of dollars." I stared at him. "Did you just calculate my childhood like a financial report?" He shrugged. "It's realistic." For the first time that night, anger started replacing the shock I had been feeling. "So, that's what I was to you?" I asked. "A cost?" "That's not what I said, but it's exactly what you mean." He leaned forward slightly. "You're being ungrateful." The word hit me like a slap. "Ungrateful?" "Yes." My father's voice was firm now. "We sacrificed a lot of money to raise you." "Money. Everything always came back to money." "I didn't ask to be born," I said quietly. The moment the words left my mouth, the room went completely silent. My father's expression hardened. "That's a childish thing to say." "No," I replied. "It's the truth. For 25 years, I had tried to be the perfect daughter. Good grades, good behavior, no arguments. But suddenly, All those efforts felt meaningless. Because if my parents had never actually wanted me, then who'd I been trying so hard to impress? I stood up again. This time, my decision felt clearer. I think I should leave, I said. My mother looked worried. Don't go like this. Like what? Upset. I looked at both of them. How else am I supposed to feel? Neither of them answered. I grabbed my jacket from the back of the chair, but before I could walk away, my father said something else, something that made me stop in my tracks. You're misunderstanding the situation. I turned slowly. How? He looked completely calm. The tax benefits weren't the only reason. My heart sank. The only reason. So there really had been reasons. Plural. What other reasons? I asked. For a moment, he hesitated. And that hesitation made a terrible feeling grow in the pit of my stomach. Because suddenly, I realized something terrifying. If the tax benefits were only one of the reasons they kept me, then there might be other reasons about my life that I had never been told. And judging by the look on my father's face, those reasons might be even worse. I froze in the middle of the room. My father's words echoed in my head. The tax benefits weren't the only reason. For a moment, I just stared at him. What do you mean? Not the only reason, I asked slowly. My father looked like he suddenly regretted saying that. My mother shifted nervously in her chair. Maybe we shouldn't get into this tonight, she said quietly. But it was too late for that. You already started, I replied. I could feel my heart beating faster again. Something about the way they were both acting made my stomach twist with anxiety. What other reasons were there? I asked. My father rubbed his forehead for a moment, like he was deciding how much to say. Then he sighed. You're going to misunderstand it again. Try me. He leaned back in his chair. When you were born, he began. Our situation was complicated. I waited. Complicated how? My parents exchanged a glance. That small moment of silent communication between them made my nerves tighten even more. Finally, my father continued. We weren't planning to have a child at that time. I already know that, I said. But the situation wasn't just about timing. What does that mean? He hesitated again. My patience was running out. Just say it. My mother finally spoke. There were other options. The words felt heavy. What kind of options? I asked quietly. She didn't answer, but I already understood what she meant. Adoption, or something even more final. The thought made my chest feel tight. So you considered not raising me at all? I said. My father shrugged slightly. We were evaluating possibilities. Evaluating like I had been some kind of business proposal. And what made you decide to keep me? I asked. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then my father said something that made my entire body go cold. You were already here, he said. And financially, it made sense. Financially. That word again. But something about his tone made me realize there was still more he wasn't saying. You're leaving something out, I said. My father looked annoyed. You're reading too much into this. No, I said firmly. You're hiding something. The room felt unbearably tense now. My mother's hands were folded tightly in her lap. My father stared at the table, and suddenly, a terrifying possibility crossed my mind. Wait, I said slowly. Both of them looked up. Am I even supposed to know about this? Neither of them answered. My heart started pounding. Is there something about my childhood that you never told me? My father looked frustrated now. This is exactly why we didn't want to have this conversation. Why? I asked. Because you're emotional. Of course I'm emotional, I said, my voice rising for the first time that night. You're talking about my life like it was a financial investment. The words echoed through the dining room. My mother looked close to tears. Lily, she said softly. But my father remained calm. Too calm. Look, he said. Raising you had certain practical benefits. I stared at him. You're still talking about benefits. Yes? I couldn't believe this was happening. Were there any reasons that had nothing to do with money? I asked. He didn't answer immediately, and that silence felt like the final confirmation of everything I feared. For 25 years, I had believed my parents raised me because they loved me, but now it felt like I had just discovered something completely different, something much colder. I need to ask you one last question, I said quietly. Mi father Sahil. What now? I took a slow breath. If the tax benefits hadn't existed, would you still have raised me? The question hung in the air. My mother looked at my father. My father looked at the table, and the silence stretched for several long seconds. Finally, he spoke. I don't know, Those 3 words hit harder than anything else he had said that night. I felt something inside my chest break. Not loudly, not dramatically, just quietly, like the last piece of an illusion finally falling apart. For 25 years, I had believed my parents were simply strict, emotionally distant, hard to please. But now I realized something far more painful. They had never truly seen me as their daughter.